And welcome back to the Ford Taylor Talks podcast. Yes, we got cameras, we got lights. We're in the Lightspeed VT studio here in Las Vegas. Ford, this is pretty cool, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it's just a wonderful place to be out here in Lightspeed VT.
Thank you, Brad, Jason, all the team here at Lightspeed VT for hooking us up with the studio. We may have to start doing some of these like this. We have a mutual friend who says he's building a studio like this in his office, but who knows, maybe when we'll get to do this again. So let's take advantage of this while we can.
Well, let's be careful about projecting into the future. You know, we've always just done it with sound.
Yeah.
You know, if our listeners watch us, they may say, would you guys please get your faces off here? You have a whole lot more credibility with your voice than you do when you're on there. So we don't want to jump into too much.
That's funny.
We better wait on some feedback.
That's good. Yeah, that's good feedback. Ford, what is this podcast? What are we doing here? What is this? How did it start? How did we, what's going on?
Well, you know, back in 2000, when I felt like I was supposed to go do this work, you know, I didn't put my name on anything, and I didn't think I was supposed to. And so we just started doing this training called transformational leadership. And I wrote my own VP MOSA, in which, you know, the own vision, purpose, mission statement. You know, it's 25 years ago this month. That's hard to believe. But anyway, when 2020 hit, and COVID hit, you know, we started getting phone calls, emails, texts. You know, if you can't get to us and we can't get to you for a live event, how are we going to hear from you? So I got talked into doing a podcast. Well, what I didn't know when I said yes to that, after we started producing them, you have to have a place to host them. And I said, well, what does that mean? Well, you need a website. So kind of for the first time, we put my name on a little bit of it. And they said, I think it was your idea, I think, to actually call it Ford Taylor Talks, you and another guy that had talked to us. And so that's how it all started. And, you know, the intent was to do that to kind of get people through COVID. And, you know, the feedback's been good. So we've just kept on going.
It's been fun.
It's been fun, having a blast.
Fun to serve old Ford Taylor, by the way.
Oh, thank you, PW. And you do that well. It's good to have you as a dear friend. It really is.
You know, we get emails and texts, and people ask us about content and whatnot. And I feel like probably the last 3 or 4 pieces of feedback that I've gotten about the podcast was talking about anger. And it's not just anger as a thing, but all the little pieces and phalanges that anger impacts. And personally, I think I was a reactor, you know, based on growing up in the car business. I mean, I was taught drive the bus, ride on the bus, or get run over by the bus. I mean, what a terrible lesson for a young man.
Right.
But that's kind of what was modeled in that business.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But I think anger, while I've read things forward where people say, well, if anger is controlled, you know, it's powerful. I just can't believe that, knowing now what I know about anger and what TL has taught me about anger. And epinephrine is a word that would have never been in my vocabulary until going through transformational leadership.
Right.
But not only do people ask me, you know, how do you control it? How did you change? How did you get rid of it? I actually tell people I can't remember the last time I really felt angry. And, you know, that's a miracle.
It's a whole different place. And often when we teach on anger, you know, we have very specific tools on how to go from angry to not angry. And we teach people how to do that. Often when we teach that, the first response is, well, number one, that's not possible. And number two, well, what would I do if I didn't have my anger? Which means they think that that you're going to give up your emotional feeling if you're not angry. In other words, what emotions am I going to have? Well, when people say that, I'm like, why don't you just try this tool and see what happens? Because you're going to find if you don't have that emotional anger, it's not going to make you emotionless. It's going to be replaced with really positive emotions. And when those positive emotions ooze out of you in your behavior, your impact on people just goes straight through the roof in a good way, up instead of down, because influence can go either way, right?
Yeah. Ford, why do you think people ask us both? I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. I feel like I'm a better person. I'm not a worse person, but I think my decision-making has really changed, and kind of walk us through. Now it's visual. Now people can see us doing it. Kind of walk through the physics part of anger, how it happens, and how to be better at controlling it.
Okay. So, every day, all of our senses get kicked in. And anytime one of our senses kicked in, that information comes up through our brainstem. It runs through our amygdala, our limbic system, and it parks back here at the doorway of the hippocampus. Well, if something happens, gets said, a behavior, if something happens that causes us to have fear, frustration, or pain, and that pain could be physical or emotional. And so if one of those things kick in, our adrenaline system, which sits right at the top of our kidney, goes into overdrive. And this adrenaline, if you will, is released into our system. One of them is called epinephrine. The other one's called norepinephrine. Let's don't worry about the difference right now. But one of them causes us to go into fight mode, and the other one causes us to go into flight or freeze mode. But either way, the reason that happens is this epinephrine goes in and it constricts the rational part of our brain. So all that rational part, it now is it's literally constricted, it's smaller. And what's left is the emotional part. And so when the epinephrine kicks in and the brain gets small, we react by saying or doing things that we would never say or do when our brain's full size. And the more and more we learn not to be angry through this tool that we teach, guess what happens? Our rational brain stays bigger and bigger and bigger. And so when we're around people or in meetings when everybody else is angry, guess what? You're now the smartest person in the room because everybody else is operating with 3% of a brain. So collectively, they got about a half a brain if there's 10 of them in the room, and you got a whole brain. If you're in a relationship with someone and the other person's angry and you're not, you're the rational one. You're just smarter than them at that point. I mean, forget that it's the right thing to do. Think about being the smartest one. I mean, that is another reason to learn to teach your epinephrine how not to go off.
I've had husbands, friends of mine, and they talk about anger, and I've been angry my whole life, and it's just who I am, and I kind of in the best way I can explain the science.
Right.
I said, dude, I mean, when that epinephrine fires, it shuts off the rational part of your brain, and you say stupid things.
Yeah.
And he kind of thinks it's some profound statement,
Right.
but it absolutely is true.
It does. And PW, I had tremendous road rage. I mean, if my wife, when I was in my mid-20s, hadn't grabbed my arm and kept me from pulling the gun out from under the seat, I mean, there's a chance I could be in prison right now, from getting so mad at road rage. And now a lot of the younger generations, if you're listening, you may not understand this, but I was considered the Bobby Knight of elementary school recreational basketball.
By the way, I've heard that about you.
Yeah, I mean, so I know the referees and umpires did not like seeing me show up. And I would get in their face when I was in my 20s. I mean, it's just crazy the stuff that you do when the epinephrine's going off that you would never do when you got a full brain. And so, after paying counselors and psychiatrists and taking medications and pastors and, asking for help. I was sexually abused when I was 6 years old, and I'm pretty sure that was part of the root of what kind of started me down this anger path. And then, of course, things just got built on and built on. But I couldn't find anybody that could actually say, they could medicate it, but I couldn't find anybody that could say, here's how you change from being an angry person to being a not angry person. I couldn't find anybody that could show me that. And so I experimented with some stuff, and that's the tool, I came up with. And now I get emails, texts, Facebook messages, from all over the world, and they'll say things like, you don't know me, but thank you. My spouse is not the same person. My boss is not the same person. My dad doesn't yell at me anymore. So we know the tool works. As you said, some people wouldn't believe it, so they probably wouldn't even try it. Or they think if they're not angry, that these other emotions that replace it, which are so good, that they might not have any emotion left.
Well, you can find a lot of information at FordTaylorTalks.com. Ford, you got Relational Leadership. The book's amazing. It's in audio. People ask me about it all the time. And what I get asked is, when are the more specific books coming for kids or for families or for marriages or for business? Like, that's a broad a broad brush that you painted with that book. Any plans, or I know you have nothing on your plate right now.
That's the hard part, you know. You know, as I shared with our team back in December, I got 7 streams of things going on right now, and the worst thing that can happen is if they intersect at the same time, and lo and behold, what's happened? They're intersecting at the same time. But the
Literally.
oh, literally.
Yeah.
But one of the 8th, kind of the 8th one, is I have had some publishers come to me and say that, you know, the book you wrote, you know, the problem with it is it belongs in every category in the bookstore because it speaks to every single category, and that we wrote it that way on purpose. But they have come and asked me, would I write 6 or 7 different ones that they've even come and said, we'll write them for you. And now with ChatGPT, they probably could actually write them for me,
Yeah.
seriously.
Yeah.
And so they could put, you know, one for marriage, you know, one for parenting, one strictly for business, you know, one for the faith community, for the churches, one for sports teams. And that because the stories, you know, because I got stories in all those categories. But if you could tell your stories in that category and link it to the tool for that particular organization or sphere, sector of influence. So I've been asked by about 4 or 5 different publishers to do that. And who knows, you know, maybe after some of these streams, some of these spinning plates that are going right now will come down. Who knows? We might do that. We'll see.
Ford, with your background, with your experience, you've been on stage where you shared a story about being down in Brazil, you know, working through translators. I mean, that was probably fun, you
Oh,
know.
that was hilarious.
That's a talk about people that full of heart and emotion
Oh,
and
passion. Oh, just
passion.
passion.
Well,
Absolutely.
you know, I mean, the Portuguese people are definitely that, aren't they?
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, I've been there 2 or 3 times, and you know, one of them had hundreds of people there, and it was just hilarious. And of course, they were using real translators. You know, often when I go to other countries, you know, I'll say a sentence or two, and then I'll pause, and they'll say it in their language, and we'll do that. And there, they actually have people in a booth, and everybody who doesn't speak English has a headphones on, and they're listening to it in Portuguese. And of course, we do have a lot of material, even relational leadership, as well as our TL manuals and PowerPoints. All that's in Portuguese, thanks to Scotty and Estee Moore. But when I was there doing this one, that was the first time I had done it that way. I've done it since then, and so I didn't really understand how it was all going. But anyway, so I would, you know me, I've got some really bad dad jokes, and so, you know, I'm always adding little funnies into everything. And so I was doing what I normally do, and I'm adding my little funnies in, and nobody's laughing. You know, and 5 to 7 or 8 seconds will go by, and then they're all laughing. I'm thinking, why are they laughing? I didn't say anything funny. So I didn't realize there was this pause
You were on
between,
delay.
I was on delay. So at the break, the guy that asked me, of course, he's getting a kick out of this, right? Because he speaks fluent English. It's actually the son of the mayor of Rio. And he comes up and he goes, let me tell you what's happening. And he shared it with me. So that afternoon, I did another one of my funnies, and I paused to wait for the laugh, and no one laughed. And I'm looking on the front row, and he's dying. I mean, he's been over laughing. And at the break, I went up. I said, okay, what just happened? He goes, well, we don't have a word for that word. And so when the translator gave your punchline, they gave the wrong
empty.
word.
It was empty.
There was nothing there. And so I was pausing, waiting on the laugh, because that's what he had coached me to do, and not one laugh. Well, the people who only spoke English laughed, but that was a small minority. So yeah, but I love going to those countries and seeing those cultures, and really, PW, watching how this stuff works across all those cultures. That's the amazing part to me.
Yeah. Ford, we had a couple people last night ask us about communication, and we started to talk about how we communicate. And you shared a great story about when you were working with that company, you were on the board, and it was trained. You were getting trained, and you were there to, you know, lead this multi-million-dollar company. But they had some feedback for you that's really been impactful.
Yeah. Well, as you know, PW, our first company we bought, it had 1 foot in the door bankruptcy. And I was 24 when I had the opportunity, and actually did it when I turned 25, which is, so Sandra graduated in May of that year, and we took over this company in June. And over the next 16 years, you know, we became the largest decorated sportswear apparel company in America. But in that process, part of what helped that happen is mergers and acquisition company called me and said, we'd like to buy your company and work alongside other companies. Then they called back and I said yes, and they called back and said, we don't really want to buy your company, we want to buy you. And so they bought part of the company, and I kept a small piece and joined these other owners who were significantly older than I was. And so we go to board meetings, and our company was just continually growing, profitable, growing. And these others were on this roller coaster ride. And then one day, the one that was the nearest my age, which was about 10 years older, called and said, can I come in to see you? So he traveled in, and he said, can I give you some feedback? And I said, yeah. And he said, we've had a board meeting without you, and we know that we all collectively need a CEO to lead us. And we all believe you're the right person, but we could never work for you. And I said, okay. He said, you may not know this. He said, but when we say something that you think is stupid, you'll do things like this. And I looked at him, I said, I do that? And he said, I've never seen you do that with your employees. I've never seen you do it with anybody except us. And I mean, I wept. That was hard feedback. But I thanked him for it. And the next board meeting we went in, and the chairman of the investment banking company, the chairman of our board, who was with the investment bankers, about an hour into the meeting, he looks at me and says, can we all take a break? And he pulls me in a private room and he goes, are you feeling okay today? And I said, I'm feeling better than I have in a long time. They call these board meetings for a reason. But anyway, I'm feeling better in a long time. I said, why do you ask? He said, I make 99% of my decisions based on your facial expressions. And today you're not telling me anything. And I said to him, I'd gotten feedback that I'm killing the team, making everybody feel stupid and hurt. And I said, you won't ever hear from me that way again. If you want to know, you're going to have to ask me. And about 6 months later, all those guys much older than me, they all came to me and asked me to be their boss. And what's so funny is, how long did I blame them? The corporation itself was stagnant, even though we were doing this. And all along, me blaming them, it was my fault every step of the way. And it was because of my facial expressions and body language. Something so simple can impact a company that big. And of course, after that, we took off in growth and profitability. But it's the same in a marriage. I mean, it's the same with parents and children. It's the same in every organization, 2 or more people. Those facial expressions, those words, we hear sticks and stones may break your bones and words will never hurt you. What a lie. I mean, sticks and stones may only break your bones. Words are devastating. But you know what? That look that you give someone, it's sometimes more devastating than the words.
Now, Ford, unlike most people, you took that feedback, and how we communicate is a pretty important part of the transformational leadership training.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty impactful when you talk about that. And people really, as I did, had to do some severe self-evaluation. And God bless Nancy, my wife, she she just says body language. She didn't say you have it. She doesn't say, hey, she just says the word body language. And it is it's a snap too.
Yeah.
Because sometimes in the busyness of life, you don't know. Like, I'm not trying to have it. I think it creeps up sometimes. And we're not perfect, but
That's for sure. We are not. Can I have a little fun with you?
Yeah.
So today we've worked pretty hard.
Yes, we have.
I mean, I don't necessarily like being in front of a camera. Everybody knows that. So that's work for me. Planning to be in front of a camera is 5 times more work than being in front of the camera. So we've worked hard planning to get in front of the camera. So today, just before lunch, I'm sitting there going, do I need to tell PW? Your body language had gotten pretty strong.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, he's just as tired as I am. And I said, well, I'll tell him after lunch. Well, as soon as you ate, you had your energy back.
I was hangry.
But my point is, I said, okay, it was just that you were just out of energy. Yeah. But I wouldn't have let you leave the room.
Yeah.
And walked around letting other people see that. I love you too much for that.
Yeah.
But once you ate, it was like it went away. And so it was just clearly you were just tired and hungry. And that's the other thing we have to be careful with. When we're watching other people, we have to be careful to, imply that they're angry or whatever. I always, one of the things I say is, let's don't judge people over something that we may think is reality, which can easily be explained away by ignorance or incompetence. Okay. And so sometimes we're looking at people, we may think, or watching their behavior, one thing, but like in your case, you were just hungry, you were tired, you were worn out. There was no anger going on. And so it was just fun today. I watched that, and you popped right out of it as soon as you ate. And I know I have to watch that. My children tell me that. They call me sangry.
Yeah.
You know, Dad, if you get too hungry, you get sad.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we can
Yeah.
see it on you. And so, yeah, we just all have to be careful on our own, knowing that we do it, and be careful not to judge others who might be in the same place that we were an hour ago.
But how cool is that to have relationships
Yeah.
where people have 100%? I mean, we give you permission.
That's it.
If I'm, off the rails,
That's right.
you can say, Pete up.
That's it.
Here's
And
what's
vice
going
versa.
on.
And
Yeah,
vice
100%.
versa.
And
Yeah.
I mean, those are cool relationships
Right.
and rare.
They're, you know what, and we want to make a lot more of them. That's part of what TL is.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
get people to connect at the heart and the mind level, and just watch what happens. It's crazy.
What do you think,
In a good way.
Ford? Here we are in 2025. We started this episode talking a little bit about anger. And man, we've got friends that are in this political cyclone, right? And every little thing, I mean, gets people sideways.
Yeah.
And, here I am talking about my wife again. She's a good one.
Yeah, she is.
She don't watch the news. And it's not just she don't care about the news, but it's so full of stuff. She has to really be intentional about where she gets her information. But we have friends, man, that like they go off on these little anger tangents based on stuff that they have no control over.
Yeah. Well, let's make a deal. If you can show me where I can find some news, I'll watch it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't watch the propaganda either, and I'm like her. And so, but you're right. I see so many of my friends that do, and I see them posting on social media, and I see them doing all these things, and I just say, can I love you enough to tell you, you're really costing yourself some influence. It doesn't matter whether I agree with what you're saying, because if you're posting things on one end of the political spectrum, you're losing influence with the other end. If you're posting things on the other end, you're losing influence with people on the other end. It's like, I just don't know why people would keep doing that when, depending on what you watch, is what you're going to hear. And if you choose to believe what you watch, then guess what? You're going to be mad at the people who are watching the opposite, who choose to believe that. And it's like, I just choose not to get all entangled in it and just go be different than what you're seeing on the media. Because I am firmly convinced that 95% of this world are smart, gifted, and talented. Well, all of them are smart, gifted, and talented in at least one area. But 95 to 97%, they are not the ones you're seeing on the propaganda. There are guys like us sitting around this table right now, and we need to pull together and have influence and stop letting that small percentage influence us so negatively.
Yeah. So Ford Taylor Talks, man, we did a podcast. You said, hey, what do you think about this podcast idea? What are we trying to accomplish? If we started over, if you were writing an executive summary, like what are we trying to accomplish with getting together, talking about transformational leadership, talking about the tools and the strategies and how it's impacted us personally, and sharing stories.
Mm-hmm.
Is it still the same? Is the goal still the same?
Yeah, it is for me, PW. When people said, how can you help us? And that's what the podcast was all about. We've never promoted our company on here. We've never promoted our books. That isn't what this podcast is about. We really came together to do this with the whole heart of, if we have some things that could benefit and help people, we just want to give it to them. And so for me, that's not changed for me at all. And I hope it never does.
Good stuff. So here we are. Let's see, June 2025. What's your next 90 days look like? You got stuff.
How much time you got?
Well, we got just a few minutes, but I think people, you're an author, you're a teacher, trainer, you consult with major companies, you got major clients, you sit on various boards.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what have you thought about landing the plane? I mean, I know you're really busy in this moment, but you got that beautiful wife at home, you
Whew.
got a couple residences, you got the
Uh,
lake house.
uh,
I mean, have you thought about landing the plane? I mean, when have you impacted enough people?
well, number one, this was supposed to be a pullback year. I mean, we went into this year saying, you know what, I'm not going to
I
take you.
actually heard that
I know
statement.
we're not going to take any new clients. We're going to get focused on this. And, things just kept happening. Um, I had Lyme disease really bad. And for those that know me, they know that I was laying in bed at night before I even knew what it was, believing I was very likely dying. And I prayed this prayer: God, take me home tonight or heal me and use me to help others. This isn't fair to Sandra because, as you know, she still runs. Part of my next few weeks is going to the senior games, the national senior games, which she wins all the races she runs at a state level and wins some at national. So that is part of what the next thing is. But it just wasn't fair to her to watch her husband dying right before her eyes when the doctor said there's nothing wrong. Well, through a miracle, I got a phone call sharing with me about this technology that they were experimenting with at a certain level, and I was a guinea pig, and it gave me my life back. And so I felt like, wow, I did ask, either heal me and use me to help others. So now we started a whole company with this frequency technology, and we've taken it to like 5 or 6 more levels, and so many people are getting their life back. And we've just launched a new company with almost all of my consulting clients have invested to launch this new company to go out and help more people with that. And so that's taken some time. We decided, let's go film all the consulting stuff, for in the future other people can have access to it. Well, I didn't come into this year expecting to do that. A friend called that I was executive coach, and he said, what would it, can we get you to come work with us or one of your generals? And I talked with Sandra, and she said, I think you're supposed to do this one yourself, because she loves the guy, and I enjoy all this. There's nothing, of course, then I got 3 daughters and a grandchild. So that stream I do a lot of city impact initiatives, where we're working with different cities around the country. And now that's turned into working nationally with some people. So all these different streams are going on. And so there's a lot of tugs. But as you know, I'm married to an angel in a woman suit. And she's the one that says, why don't you keep going? Why don't you push yourself until you're 70? And I said to her, which is 15 years from now. No, I'm kidding.
2 weeks.
A couple
2
of years
weeks from now, he'll
But
be.
anyway, and I said to her, I said, I'll do that if that's what you want me to do, and I'll do it for you. She's the one that did say, go get this film where you, before I use my term, before you age out, while you're still young enough to do it. And so, but I said to her, if you really want me to push it this hard, and you really mean it, and because she really wants to see the fullness of the impact of what we believe God's given us. And I said, if I do that, when I come home on the weekend, I may not have as much for you. And she said, don't worry, I'm going to start doing more for you. I mean, that was her response. And I don't know how she could do any more, but that was her response. And I'm going to stop. I'm going to get to where I'm not busy when you get home, so we can spend more time together. So the good news is we're in alignment on this. The better news is that, when some of these things get landed and someone else is running the Rife technology, and someone else, as a good friend of ours, Dan McNeil, and you are taking all this on. Once we get it filmed, you said, let us have it, and you go rest for a while. So I'm blessed to have a wife who is saying, come on, leave this legacy. As I said, honey, what if nobody wants to buy what we're about to do? Her answer was, who cares? Then we'll all have it. Your children will have it. Your friends will have it. So she's an angel in a woman's suit. So yeah, over my next 90 days, it's, I'm helping a guy with a merger and acquisition on his company right now, helping him sell it. So it's just a lot going on. But you know what? It'll land. Some of these things will get landed, and when they do, me, I'll probably find something else. I tell my doctor, I say, I know one day I'm going to come get a physical. I say this to him because he always rubs his hand together and wants to know why is it that I'm the only patient my age who takes no medications. He'll say that to me every physical. I go once a year. And I say to him, I know one day I'm going to come in, you're going to call me after the blood test and say, okay, you got to quit eating like an 18-year-old and working like a 30-year-old. But I guess as long as I can do that, I'm probably going to keep doing it. I'm never planning on retiring, PW.
Well, let's close with this. Maybe someone watching this podcast, I usually say listening or watching this podcast, they need a little TL. Something's going on in their life. Could have been an event, could have been something that happened 20 years ago or 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Where do they find the tools? Where can they go right now to get something, to get a little taste of what we got, of what we're doing? Where do they find this stuff? Where can they go get something?
Well, one really good free resource is to Ford Taylor Talks. I mean, there's lots of podcasts, there's lots of blogs, doesn't cost you anything. So if you want some free resources, they're out there. If you want to spend a little bit of money and get a book, it's called Relational Leadership. You can get it off either the Ford Taylor Talks website or the Transform Lead website. You can order from Amazon. Please don't do that. We don't make any money on those. I'm kidding. But, so that, if they wanted to do TL on demand, they could get the interactive training platform. We think next year we're going to go back to doing live events, and we'll let people know when we do that. COVID is completely past us. And again, I wouldn't even have time right now. But as some of this other stuff comes off. So we want to keep doing that. And of course, this podcast is another way that we want to keep helping people. But if you're having a down moment, I can tell you more than likely, if you're like most of us, when you have those down moments, there's a chance that it's either around your health, it's around your relationships, or it's around your finances. And if you're having struggles in any one of those areas, the best thing you can do is be vulnerable and transparent. One of the things our team gets told all the time is your level of transparency and vulnerability is encouraging, but it's scary, because we say, let's be dangerously transparent. But, transparency, and I'm talking to you if you're having struggles, it's anybody, but, transparency, is you sharing your stuff that you don't want to share. And so if it's a financial problem, a health problem, a relational problem, be transparent and share that with someone that you trust that might be able to help you. Vulnerability is putting yourself at risk. And so when you're being transparent, you're being vulnerable also. But vulnerability could be putting yourself at risk. In other words, it's not that you're sharing something that's ugly or dirty, but it's still risky to share it, to speak the truth or share what you're going through. But if you're going through it, just don't try to do it alone. You get to see us guys on stage and on the podcast and you get to see what you would call the good side, but we have days like that too. We're human. The difference, I think, in what we have and what most people have is we have the relationships with other people and the tools to overcome those days, over those moments. And so, go out, find out what is it that you need to change the thinking. Because if you can change the thinking, you can change the feeling. If you change the feeling, you can change the behavior. So be encouraged. You're not alone. I would encourage you to stop watching stuff that's, it's getting you whacked out. We did a podcast once, you are not what you eat. And I said, if you were, I'd be a walking bag of peanut M&Ms or a bowl of ice cream. And for the next 2 trainings after that, people were bringing me ice cream and peanut M&Ms. So I should have said it sooner. But anyway, but you're not what you eat, you are what you think. And what you think is what you feel, and what you watch, what you read, what you pour into your mind, garbage in, garbage out, positive in, positive out. And so if you're struggling, you might ask yourself, what am I watching? What am I listening to? What is this going in that may be causing this feeling of what's coming out? So there's just a couple of hints that might help a little bit.
Good stuff, Ford Taylor. I appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you, PW.
I love
Same
you,
here.
buddy.
Love you too. Absolutely.
Ford Taylor Talks. I'm Pat Williams. He's Ford Taylor. Let's land this plane, shall we?
Let's land it. No matter what you're going through, the one thing I found is that if we've ever been hurt, if we've done things we wish we hadn't have done, if we've hurt other people, I've found that most of our pain is rooted in unforgiveness. And so if someone's hurt you, if you can find a place in your heart to forgive them, you're going to be the winner. If you've done things that you wish you hadn't have done, if you find a place to forgive yourself, you're going to be the winner. But when we learn to find that place of forgiveness, we learn how to love. We learn how to love others. We learn how to love ourselves in an appropriate way, not the egotistical, narcissistic way. And what happens is when we learn how to do that, again, leadership is about influence. And influence can go either way. Transformation can be negative or it can be positive, but it's about influence. But when we learn to forgive, when we learn to love that way, we learn to positively influence others. And now not only are we personally transformed, the people around us have an opportunity to experience what we've experienced. So do your best no matter what you're going through. Wake up every morning, be grateful, be thankful, learn to forgive, love, influence, and transform.
Good stuff, 40. I'm Pat Williams. He's Ford Taylor. You just watched the Ford Taylor Talks podcast. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Ford Taylor Talks. For more information and resources to help you love, influence, and transform, please visit fordtaylortalks.com.